The soft hum of the cargo ship's engines was James Chen's only companion as he navigated through the debris field of the outer rim. His small vessel, the Star Runner, wasn't much to look at, but it had gotten him through countless supply runs in the past 5 years. The ship's worn leather pilot seat creaked as he leaned forward, squinting at an unusual reading on his scanner. "That's strange," he muttered, adjusting the sensitivity. The scanner was picking up energy signatures that didn't match the usual asteroid patterns. As he brought his ship closer, the vast emptiness of space suddenly lit up with brilliant flashes of purple and green energy beams. A massive space battle was raging just beyond the debris field. Two sleek, crystalline ships were firing at a smaller vessel that moved with incredible speed and grace. James recognized the attacking ships immediately. They belonged to the Drachnid pirates, the scourge of the Outer Rim. The smaller ship, though damaged, bore the distinctive markings of the Virexian Empire. James knew he should turn around. Getting involved in a fight between the fearsome Virexians and space pirates was a sure way to get killed. But something about the smaller ship's movements caught his eye. It was fighting with desperation, not confidence. The Virexian ship took another hit, and its engines flickered. James watched as it spun out of control, trailing smoke and debris. Without thinking, he pushed his cargo ship forward, activating the emergency beacon. "This is human vessel Star Runner," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Cease fire immediately. This sector is under Earth Protection Treaty." It was a lie, of course. This sector was unclaimed space, but James was counting on the pirates' notorious dislike for paperwork. The mere suggestion of Earth bureaucracy made the Drachnid ships hesitate. That moment was all he needed. James fired up his ship's magnetic grapple, usually used for collecting space junk, and latched onto the damaged Virexian vessel. The pirates, unwilling to risk an international incident, disappeared back into the debris field. When James managed to pull the ship into his cargo bay, he grabbed his emergency med kit and rushed to help. The airlock hissed as he cut through, and what he found inside made him freeze. A tall, muscular figure in ornate armor lay sprawled across the control panel. Purple blood leaked from several wounds, and the warrior's breathing was shallow. As James approached, the figure's helmet retracted, revealing the face of a woman with silvery skin and bioluminescent markings. Her eyes, fierce despite her injuries, locked onto him. "Commander Clara of the Virexian Empire," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. "If you're here to finish me, human, make it quick." James didn't waste time arguing. He could see she was dying. "I'm here to help," he said, pulling out his medical scanner. "Try not to move." Clara watched with a mixture of confusion and curiosity as James worked. His movements were quick but careful, using simple tools and medicines that seemed primitive compared to Virexian technology. Yet somehow they were working. "Why?" she asked as he sealed a particularly bad wound. "Our species are not allies." James shrugged, focusing on stopping the bleeding. "Because you needed help. Sometimes it's that simple." As consciousness began to fade, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries: surprise. This human, with his basic tools and small cargo ship, had done what an entire fleet of advanced Virexian vessels couldn't. He had saved her life. Her last thought before passing out was that perhaps she had much to learn from these supposedly primitive humans after all. Clara woke to the sound of human cursing and the smell of something burning. She found herself lying on a makeshift bed in what appeared to be the cargo hold of the small human vessel. Her wounds had been bandaged with simple cloth and metal staples, primitive yet surprisingly effective. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk," James's voice echoed from somewhere above. The ship shuddered, and more burning smells filled the air. Despite her body's protests, Clara pushed herself up and followed the sound. She found James hanging upside down in an access panel, surrounded by tools and spare parts. The sight was so undignified that she almost laughed. No Virexian engineer would ever work in such a position. "Your life support systems are failing," she observed, recognizing the warning sounds. James poked his head out, face smudged with grease. "Yeah, that last rescue maneuver strained the processors. But I've got it under control." He didn't sound worried, which confused Clara even more. "You have no backup systems," she stated. "No redundancies. How are you not panicking?" James grinned, pulling himself out of the panel. "Who says I don't have backups?" He walked over to a wall of what looked like jump to Clara and pulled out several boxes. "See these? Old air filters from mining ships. With a little modification, they'll work just fine." Clara watched in fascination as James basically rebuilt a life support system from scraps. It wasn't elegant or advanced, but it worked. Her own people would have considered such improvisation beneath them. "In the Virexian fleet," she said, "we would simply activate our backup quantum processors." "And what happens when those fail?" James asked, tightening a bolt. "They don't fail. They're perfect." Even as she said it, Clara remembered how her own perfect ship had been shot down. A warning alarm suddenly blared through the ship. James rushed to the cockpit, Clara following close behind. The radar showed 3 ships approaching, more Drachnid pirates. "They must have realized I was bluffing about the Earth Protection Treaty," James muttered, his hands flying over the controls. Clara felt a rush of shame. "Leave me at the next port. I have brought danger to your ship." James didn't even look up from the controls. "Not happening. You're still healing, and I don't abandon passengers." He studied the radar for a moment, then smiled. "Besides, I have an idea." What followed was the strangest battle maneuver Clara had ever witnessed. James turned off all main systems, letting the ship appear dead in space. Then he vented excess fuel in a specific pattern, creating a cloud around them. "Your plan is to hide in a fuel cloud?" Clara asked incredulously. "They have thermal scanners." "Exactly," James replied, holding up what looked like mining charges. "They'll see us. That's the point." When the pirates entered the fuel cloud, James triggered the charges. The explosion wasn't meant to destroy. Instead, it created a spectacular light show that overloaded the pirates' sensitive scanning equipment. In the confusion, James powered up and slipped away, using the debris field as cover. Clara sat in stunned silence. The entire tactic had been completely illogical, unpredictable, and absolutely brilliant. No Virexian commander would have ever conceived of such a strategy, let alone executed it in a damaged cargo ship. Half she started, then stopped, unsure how to even frame her question. James just shrugged. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. It's just the one that works. In that moment, Clara made a decision that would shock the Virexian Empire to its core. She, a legendary warrior of the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, would ask this simple human cargo pilot to teach her his ways. James nearly spilled his coffee when Clara made her request. The 7-foot-tall alien warrior stood before him in the small kitchen area of his ship, her silver skin gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "You want me to teach you?" he asked, wondering if his universal translator was malfunctioning. "Yes." Clara's luminescent markings pulsed with determination. "Your methods are unorthodox, but effective. In all my centuries of combat, I have never seen anyone fight like you do." James set down his coffee cup. "I don't fight. I survive. There's a difference." "Exactly." Clara stepped forward, her presence filling the small space. The Virexian Empire has the most advanced combat training in the galaxy. We learn 10,000 ways to win a battle. But you create new ways on the spot. That is what I wish to learn. Before James could respond, the ship's proximity alarm went off again. They rushed to the cockpit, where the scanner showed a massive Virexian cruiser approaching. "Your people?" James asked. Hilara's expression darkened. "Yes, a recovery team, no doubt. They will demand I return." James studied the cruiser's approach pattern. "You don't want to go back." "Not yet. Not until I understand." Her eyes met his. "Help me hide." James looked at his radar, then at the debris field they were still traveling through. A crazy idea formed in his mind. Ever heard of playing dead? What followed was a crash course in human deception. James powered down his ship and instructed Clara in the art of creating false debris patterns. They worked together, spreading pieces of scrap metal in a way that suggested her ship had been destroyed. The key, James explained as they worked, isn't to make it perfect. Perfect looks fake. We want it to look messy, random. Clara absorbed every word, fascinated by this completely different approach to warfare. Her training had always emphasized precision and perfection. This deliberate imperfection was revolutionary. When the Virexian cruiser scanned the area, they found exactly what James had planned: evidence of a fierce battle, scattered debris, and apparent destruction. No signs of survivors. As they watched the cruiser leave, Clara turned to James. "You didn't use a single piece of advanced technology. Just scrap metal and understanding of how they think." "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest to see," James replied, powering his ship back up. "Especially when you're trained to look for complexity." "Teach me more," Clara said, her voice filled with newfound respect. "Teach me to think like a human." James scratched his head. "Well, first thing about human training, we learn by doing. See that maintenance panel that's been giving us trouble? Let's start there." For the next few hours, James guided Clara through basic ship maintenance. Her enhanced strength could easily rip the panels off, but he taught her to feel the metals give, to listen to the machinery sounds. She learned more about adaptive thinking from fixing a stubborn fuel pump than she had in years of combat training. In Virexian ships, she said, wiping grease from her hands, we would simply replace any malfunctioning part with a perfect duplicate. And when you don't have a duplicate, we would consider the ship lost. Clara looked at her grease-stained hands with wonder. "We would never think to repair it like this." James smiled. Lesson 1. Everything can be fixed if you're willing to get your hands dirty and think differently. Clara stood, her towering figure somehow more humble than before. "I understand now why the Empire cannot defeat humanity despite our superior technology. You don't fight the way we expect. You don't even think the way we expect." "That's the thing about humans," James said, tossing her a wrench. "We're full of surprises." News of Commander Calera's decision spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Virexian Empire's most decorated warrior choosing to learn from a human cargo pilot was unprecedented. The Star Runner's communication system buzzed constantly with demands from both human and Virexian authorities. "This is outrageous." The holographic image of Admiral Virax filled the small cockpit. "Commander Clara, you will return to the fleet immediately. This human is clearly manipulating you." Clara stood tall beside James's pilot chair. "With respect, Admiral, I choose to stay. I am learning things our empire has never considered." After ending the transmission, James rubbed his temples. "You know they won't give up easily." "Neither will your people," Clara noted, pointing to the messages from Earth Command. They all suggested the same thing. that Clara was a spy trying to steal human military secrets. James laughed. Military secrets? I'm just teaching you basic maintenance and survival skills. But they both knew it was more than that. In the past week, Clara had begun to master what she called human thinking. She learned to see solutions where others saw only problems. During their latest training session, James created a simulation of a space battle. Instead of using superior firepower, the Virexian way, Clara had to fight with a damaged ship and limited resources. Remember, James said, strength isn't always about power. Sometimes it's about turning weakness into advantage. Clara nodded, her silver fingers dancing over the controls. When 3 enemy ships appeared in the simulation, she surprised James by venting plasma from her damaged engine. The radioactive cloud not only hid in her ship, but also confused the enemy's sensors. Impressive, James said. You're thinking creatively now. I begin to understand why humans survived first contact with our empire, Clara replied. We expected you to fight like us. Instead, you turned everything we knew about warfare upside down. Their moment of pride was interrupted by new alarms. 2 ships were approaching, one Virexian, one human, both demanding immediate docking. They're working together, James frowned. That's new. Clara's bioluminescent markings pulsed with concern. This is not official. Something is wrong. James checked his scanners. Both ships are armed way beyond regulation limits. Definitely not normal patrol vessels. They fear what we might achieve together, Clara realized. Both sides have those who prefer the old ways of conflict. James smiled that casual human smile that had first intrigued Clara. Well then, shall we show them what a human Virexian team can do? Working together, they prepared their defense. James's cargo hold became a maze of improvised traps. Clara positioned herself strategically, ready to use her strength, but now enhanced with human unpredictability. When the ships forced their way in, they found the Star Runner apparently abandoned. The boarding parties moved cautiously through the cargo hold, weapons ready. They never expected the artificial gravity to suddenly reverse, sending them floating helplessly. They didn't anticipate the cargo containers to release harmless but disorienting gas. And they certainly weren't prepared for a Virexian warrior to move through zero gravity using maintenance tools as improvised weapons. Clara disabled the intruders with precise strikes, while James used his ship systems in ways their designers never imagined. Within minutes, both boarding parties were secured. That, Clara said, looking at their captives, was more satisfying than any battle I've won with pure strength. James nodded. Lesson learned. The best victory isn't about who's stronger or more advanced. It's about who can adapt and work together. Their success that day would change everything, but it also painted an even bigger target on their backs. The exhibition arena on Verex Prime was packed with spectators from across the galaxy. High-ranking officials from both the Virexian Empire and Earth sat in the viewing chambers, watching as Clara prepared to face her challengers. James stood in her corner, looking oddly calm among the advanced alien technology. Remember, he said, handing her a simple wrench, they're expecting perfect Virexian combat forms. Don't give them what they expect. Clara nodded, tucking the wrench into her belt. 5 of the Empire's top warriors waited in the arena, their enhanced armor gleaming under the artificial light. They had come to prove that Clara's new, human-influenced fighting style was inferior to pure Virexian combat. The first warrior attacked with textbook precision, his movements a blur of practiced perfection. But Clara didn't respond with a traditional countermove. Instead, she rolled under his strike, using the arena's magnetic floor plates to propel herself forward. a trick she'd learned from watching James repair magnetic cargo locks. "Impossible," shouted one of the Virexian generals. "She's fighting like a human," James said quietly, smiling. Clara moved with unpredictable patterns, combining her natural strength with improvised techniques. When two warriors cornered her, she used the wrench to loosen a panel in the arena floor, creating an obstacle they never expected. Their perfect formations broke against her chaos. In the viewing chamber, Admiral Virax gripped his seat. "This is an embarrassment to our combat traditions." But next to him, the human representatives leaned forward with interest. They saw what the Virexians couldn't: the beauty of adaptation, the power of combining two different ways of thinking. Clara faced her final opponent, the legendary warrior Tikal, undefeated in 3 centuries of combat. He charged with devastating force, his armor systems at full power. Clara didn't try to match his strength. Instead, she remembered James's lessons about using the environment. She ducked under Tikal's strike and tossed a handful of metal shavings into the air. The particles interfered with his armor sensors, creating momentary confusion. That split second was all she needed. With a move that was part Phyrexian combat form and part human street fighting, she took him down. The arena fell silent. 5 of the Empire's greatest warriors lay defeated by techniques no combat computer could have predicted. "This is what I learned from my human teacher," Clara announced, her voice echoing through the arena. "Not weakness, but adaptability. Not chaos, but creativity." James stepped forward to stand beside her. Some Phyrexian officials turned away in disgust, but others watched with growing interest. Among them was General Cathar, the head of the Empire's training academies. "Fascinating," Cathar said, approaching them. "You've combined our strength with human unpredictability. The results are impressive." "This is just the beginning," Clara replied. "Imagine what we could achieve if we learned from each other instead of fighting." But not everyone shared their vision. In the shadows of the arena, angry messages were being sent. Powerful figures in both human and Virexian society saw Clara and James's success as a threat to the old order. As they left the arena, James noticed several suspicious figures following them. "Looks like your victory made some people nervous," he whispered. Clara's markings pulsed with determination. Let them come. They'll learn what human ingenuity and Virexian strength can do together. James checked his pocket toolkit, simple tools that had become powerful weapons in their hands, ready for another lesson in human-style problem-solving. "Always," Clara replied, realizing that their greatest challenge was just beginning. The attack came at midnight, ship time. 6 heavily armed vessels surrounded the Star Runner, 3 human and 3 Virexian. Inside their cockpit, James and Clara watched as the enemy ships moved into position. "Corrupt officials from both sides working together," Clara said, her markings glowing dimly in the dark cockpit. "They fear what we represent." James checked his systems with unusual calmness. "You know what's funny? They brought the most advanced ships from both fleets to stop a cargo hauler and its crew of 2. They still think like traditional warriors," Clara replied, understanding James's point. "They expect a direct fight." The radio crackled. "Surrender now," a modified voice demanded. "Your experiments in cross-species training end today." Instead of responding, James turned to Clara. "Remember that maintenance trick I taught you last week? The one about rerouting power?" Clara's eyes lit up. "The one you said would be crazy to try in actual combat." "Exactly." James grinned. "They're looking for either human tactics or Phyrexian tactics. Let's give them something new." What followed was unlike any space battle ever recorded. When the enemy ships opened fire, the Star Runner's lights went dark. But instead of running or fighting back, the small cargo ship began leaking radiation from multiple points. "Their hull is breaching," one attacker reported. "They're finished." But Clara had learned well from James. The radiation wasn't from damage. It was controlled leaks from the ship's power core, released in a specific pattern. The energy readings confused the advanced targeting systems of their attackers. "Can't get a lock," shouted another attacker. "Their signature keeps changing." James piloted the Star Runner through the chaos, while Clara managed their improvised defense systems. They had turned the entire cargo hold into one massive energy disruption field, using techniques that mixed Phyrexian energy manipulation with human mechanical ingenuity. The enemy ships, trying to coordinate between two different combat systems, couldn't adapt fast enough. Their own advanced technology became a weakness as the Star Runner's unpredictable energy patterns played havoc with their sensors. "Impact in 3, James called out, his hands steady on the controls. Clara braced herself. "Remember, we only have one chance at this." The Star Runner dove between two enemy ships. At the perfect moment, they released their cargo bay doors. Hundreds of small objects scattered into space, spare parts, tools, and pieces of scrap metal. But each piece had been modified with a tiny energy cell, creating a cloud of floating disruptors. The enemy's ship's shields, designed to stop powerful energy weapons, didn't register the small objects as threats until too late. Their shield generators overloaded trying to process thousands of tiny, irregular energy signatures. "Send the message," James said, watching as their attackers' ships began to drift. Clara activated their communication system. "This is Commander Clara and James Chen. We have disabled your ships using technology that neither humans nor Phyrexians would have created alone. This is the power of our cooperation." They transmitted the entire battle recording to both Earth and Verex Prime. In it was proof not just of the corrupt officials' plot, but of something more important. Evidence that humans and Phyrexians could achieve amazing things together. As they secured their disabled attackers, Clara turned to James. "You taught me that winning isn't about having the strongest weapon." "And you taught me that strength isn't just about physical power," James replied. "Together, we've created something entirely new." Looking at their defeated enemies, Clara realized that this victory wasn't just about saving themselves. They had shown both civilizations a new path forward, if they were brave enough to take it. 1 month after the battle, James found himself standing in the Great Hall of Verex Prime. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from both Earth and the Phyrexian Empire. Clara stood beside him, her silver armor polished to perfection, but with a simple human wrench still hanging from her belt. "You really want to keep that wrench, huh?" James whispered as they waited to be called forward. "It represents everything I learned," she replied. "Sometimes the simplest tool, used creatively, is worth more than the most advanced weapon." The Emperor of Verex himself sat on his crystalline throne, his bioluminescent markings glowing with interest as he studied the unlikely pair before him. Beside his throne stood the Earth Ambassador, her simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the ornate Phyrexian decorations. "We have reviewed the evidence from your battle," the Emperor announced, his voice echoing through the hall. "The corrupt officials who sought to maintain division between our peoples have been arrested. But that is not why you are here today." Clara stepped forward. "My Emperor, I request permission to establish a new kind of training academy. One where humans and Phyrexians can learn from each other." Murmurs filled the hall. Such a thing had never been proposed before. "Demonstrate," the Emperor commanded. James pulled out a broken piece of Phyrexian technology, a quantum stabilizer that had been declared irreparable. Clara took it and, using both her enhanced strength and the repair techniques James had taught her, fixed it in ways the Virexian engineers had never considered. Impossible, one of the court scientists muttered. The quantum matrix cannot be realigned without. But Clara had already done it, using a combination of precise Virexian energy manipulation and creative human problem-solving. The Earth ambassador stepped forward. We've seen the training videos. Commander Clara's new fighting style combines the best of both our peoples. And Mr. Chen's engineering solutions, enhanced by Virexian knowledge, have solved problems we thought impossible. The Emperor rose from his throne. For centuries, we believed our advancement would come from perfecting our existing systems. But you two have shown us that true growth comes from learning new ways of thinking. The Academy is approved, he announced, but with one condition. James and Clara waited nervously. You must both lead it, the Emperor said, surprising everyone. The human who teaches adaptation and the Virexian who learned to adapt, together. The Earth ambassador nodded in agreement. We're calling it the Hybrid Solutions Academy, a place where both our species can learn to be stronger together. As applause filled the hall, James looked at Clara. You know this means I'll have to stick around for a while. Good, she replied, her markings pulsing with happiness. I still have much to learn about human ingenuity. And perhaps, she paused, placing her hand on his shoulder, other human qualities as well. The ceremony that followed was broadcast across both civilizations. It showed a simple human cargo pilot and a mighty Virexian warrior standing as equals, proving that the strongest force in the universe wasn't technology or physical power. It was the ability to learn from each other and adapt. As they walked out of the great hall together, James noticed Clara's wrench needed tightening. Here, he said, adjusting it. Some things still need a human touch. And some things, she replied, using her enhanced strength to effortlessly lift a fallen decorative pillar back into place, need a Virexian one. They both laughed, knowing that their greatest adventure, teaching two civilizations to work together, was just beginning. But as long as they had each other, some human ingenuity, and a trusty wrench, anything was possible.